Paris, France, a city of great thinkers, architects, and known for one of the bloodiest revolutions in all of Europe. The story begins on May 16th, 1770, when Prince Louis Capet and the Archduchess of Austria, Marie Antoinette, got married. Prince Louis was said to be a weak man. He was described as a fat, ill-bred boy. And on the night of their wedding, Prince Louis had no interest in having children. The lack of children started rumors that the king was a weak man that was too scared to perform his marital duties. After the death of his grandfather, King Louis XV, on May 10th, 1774, Louis XVI was now King of France, a France that was in financial ruin after losing the 7-Year War against Britain, and the finance of the American Revolution left the country poor. 2 decades of poor harvests and a drought made it so that the poor had no money or food, but the upper classes had stockpiles of wheat and were unaffected from it all. A lot of people started to question the king and upper classes, and how just because they are rich they can do what they want. This thinking started the Age of Enlightenment. French philosophers questioned the king and how France was unfair and unequal. King Louis was reported to be a weak king that did not know how to run a country, and he was not liked. He summoned the King's Estate, which is an advisory made of the 3 estates, and had not been summoned since 1614. The King's Estate is an advising part to the king. It is made up of the 3 estates: the first estate, the clergy; the second estate, the nobility; and the third estate, which includes the peasants, middle class, and everybody else. During the meeting, the third estate wanted reform, but every time they voted, they were outvoted by the other 2 estates, even though the third estate was a majority of the population. And after the meeting, the third estate went on to form its own government, called the National Assembly, and in a nearby tennis court, they took the tennis court oath, and vowed to meet until their demands were met. Within the week, they had 47 nobles join them for a fight for equal rights and opportunities, and more. One way the king tried to help the situation was taxation and free labor. The poor, which were already struggling to make ends meet, started to be heavily taxed in every direction that they could, which did nothing but make the third estate hate the king and queen, because nothing changed. Bread was expensive, and a lot of people did not like the spending, especially the queen. Marie lived a life of luxury, and she was a big spender when it came to things like beauty. She spent so much that the third estate gave her the nickname Madame Deficient. The second part is labor, or the labor tax, and where people were forced to work a certain amount of days for the local lords. Unpaid, of course. And the third estate was not happy because the taxes were not even across France. If you were in the second or first estate, you would have to pay little to no tax in work or money. The third estate is about 98% of the population. So they revolted, causing riots in cities and looting, robbing, and if you were a baker, you could be hanged if you were suspected of keeping bread for yourself. One thing that changed history was the storming of the Bastille. The Bastille was an armory and prison. It was a symbol of royal rule in the center of France. And on July 14th, 1798, the rioters started by storming the Hotel Las Invalides for its large supply of rifles. Afterwards, they headed to the Bastille for more supplies, in which they fought and killed guards defending the armory. Once they got what they wanted, they cut off heads and put them on pikes. Now let's talk about the man that was head of the radicals, Maximilien Robespierre, a French lawyer that was one of the nobles that joined during the beginning of the Revolution. Him and some other nobles started a very radical political party called the Jacobin Club. This man, along with others, wanted the king to be removed from power, and the Prussian Duke of Brunswick threatened to burn Paris to the ground if anything happened to the king. At this point, the king was reduced to a figurehead. Then on August 10th, 1792, the king's palace was stormed, and the King Louis fled and took refuge in the chamber of the Legislative Assembly, where Robespierre and his radical Jacobin Club were gaining power. So because of the situation, they held a vote to suspend the monarchy entirely. So now King Louis was now just Citizen Louis Capet. He was sent to prison so that an eye could be kept on him. The National Convention officially declared the French Republic on September 22nd, 1792. At this point, France was at war with Austria and Prussia, and they both declared once they won, they will put citizen Louis Capet back in the throne, and Robespierre and the National Convention held a vote and found citizen Louis Capet guilty of treason, but his punishment was debated. Moderates wanted to deport him, but the radicals called for him to be executed, and by a vote of 361 to 360, he was executed by guillotine on January 21st, 1793. One of the most important people executed during the French Revolution was Marie Antoinette. She was tried and proven guilty of treason in 1793. She was a person of luxury and expected to be brought to the guillotine in a royal carriage, but she was provided with a wooden cart. The most hated woman in French history was executed on October 17, 1793. Once the food problem was better and France was doing better in the war, lots of radical leaders and radical followers wanted to rein in the terror and end the war and fix the economy and normalize the republic. Robespierre started his religion called the Republic of the Supreme Being, but his worst mistake is on July 26, when in a speech he threatened his followers with the guillotine, and after the speech there was a vote and Robespierre was sent to the guillotine. 2 days later he was executed. The revolution went on for another 5 years after Robespierre's death, and where Napoleon Bonaparte, a French general, went on to liberate cities and become a dictator over France.